Pete, I have 7 o'clock if you want to get
Okay.
started.
Good evening, Nick. Good evening, Gus. This is the Board of Selectmen's meeting for January 5, 2021. That may be the first time I've said that. 2021. Pursuant to the Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Medfield Select Board is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen or view this meeting while in progress may do so by following the instructions on the agenda and meeting notice. All votes subject to remote participation and therefore will be roll call votes. Reminder that the meeting is being recorded. You can see it live on YouTube. And we would like to start our meeting as usual with a moment of appreciation for our troops that are serving around the world. Thank you. Tough time of year for those troops to be far from home. So Chris, I actually printed out an agenda. So let's see, we're doing a public hearing for Eversource for installations of a new pole to provide electric service for an electric vehicle charging station located at 478 Main Street, which looks to be the Bank of America building parking lot.
Correct. So I just need, Mike, if you can read the public hearing notice.
I will read the public hearing notice.
Thank you.
In conformity with the requirements of Section 22 of Chapter 166 of the General Laws, the Medfield Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing virtually via Zoom on Tuesday, January 5th, 2021 at 7 p.m. upon petition of NStar Electric Company, DBA Eversource Energy, and Verizon. The purpose of the hearing is to obtain a grant of location to install one new pole, 18-1A. This work is necessary to provide electric service for electric vehicle charging station located at 478 Main Street. All town boards and interested parties will be given an opportunity to speak at this hearing. And I will note, given the presence of Verizon in this petition, I'll be recusing myself from this discussion. And so in keeping with board recusal policy, I will do so by turning off my video.
Thanks for reading the notice, Mike.
And then Pete, I just need you to open the hearing.
Okay, I will declare the hearing open. Do we have somebody from Eversource?
Christine Cosby is supposed to be joining us tonight. I don't see her here. Christine, if you're here, raise your hand for me and we can put you, promote you.
And if she's not here, maybe we could leave the hearing open and go on with our other business.
Yeah, let's give her a minute to see if that's, she does not appear to be here yet.
So why don't we go on with the agenda, which is next is Fred Davis, Medfield Energy Committee Chair, to discuss Medfield Energy Committee matters. And I think I saw, Fred, from an earlier email that you're going to show us the video.
Like nobody wants to kick this meeting off.
Where are all my people?
Fred's on the list.
There we go. There's Fred.
Okay, and I'm just starting my headphone. Hang on.
Don't worry about it, Fred. I've set the bar pretty low tonight. I'm trying to sign in.
Okay.
Thanks for coming, Fred.
Video will come in a few minutes. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear and see you both.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity tonight to speak on behalf of Medfield Energy Committee. There are others here attending the meeting, I believe, and at the end of my general remarks, most of this will be general remarks, we'll mention a couple of things about the state hospital developments, and if Jim Nail is here and could be promoted, at least by that time, that would be great. He's heading up the Energy Committee Medfield State Hospital Work Group. And Nick, are you ready to queue up the video? It's a 2-minute video. Not now, but are you ready for it when it's, okay, great. So there are huge developments happening in the realm of climate action and energy, state and national. My head literally is spinning with 6 meetings in the last 2 days. There were 3 articles in today's Boston Globe about the major climate bill. But I'm not saying that tonight is the right time to review all these major new developments. I do look forward to coming back to talk about them, as they will apply to Medfield, and they will. But there are also major developments in Medfield on the energy front, and we will be mentioning a couple of them tonight. But my main points I want to make are general. That's because the purpose of the time I requested tonight is to attempt to reset or reframe or readjust town thinking about the work of Medfield Energy Committee. I'd like to say the timing is appropriate because it's in the hopes that it will reset our work in the new year. So questions were raised a month ago or so at another meeting about the size of the Energy Committee and about the nature of our work, and also how can such a large committee work efficiently. So all those are great questions, and I realized, thinking about it afterwards, I realized that an explanation is warranted. So I'm here to give that explanation tonight. I apologize in advance if it seems overlong, but for me, it's overdue, and I want to take responsibility and apologize to the extent that we could have, should have made such an explanation earlier previously tonight. So in about 15 minutes, I'm going to cover elemental, emergency, inconvenient, and boring. So those are the 4 aspects I'd like to hit. So we're called the Energy Committee. We were established in 2008 with a charter that tasks us to look at not just energy, but also harmful emissions resulting from energy use. And that's on the municipal level, but also the town level. We were named Energy, but we could just as appropriately be called today the Climate Committee or the Sustainability Committee. And many towns have, various versions. We have the name Energy Committee, and it's fine with me. But I'm introducing these larger aspects of our work, and to let you know that they not only are in the background, but now they're in the foreground. So elemental, we grew up with the idea that energy is utilities, meaning it's in the background. You don't think of it, it's just there. And as a result, in our generations, we did lose sight how much energy has become integral to our modern lives. It's ubiquitous, and I'm choosing the word elemental, the way that the ancients used it. Air is elemental, water is elemental, fire is elemental. It's just there, it's necessary. Elemental, okay. And sure enough, fire is the form of energy that humans have used for thousands of years to cook our meals, to warm ourselves, to light our nights. And for at least 2 centuries, it's powered industry and most of our transportation. And so what could be so wrong? What could be wrong with something so elemental? Well, today, of course, we understand that we cannot use fire or combustion with the abandon that we've lived with, that we grew up with, I should say, because the direct byproducts of the carbon combustion cumulatively cause a pollution, the greenhouse gases, which are tilting the whole planet's climate system beyond repair. Which brings us to the next word, beyond elemental, emergency. So now this is the moment, Nick, if you could cue up the video. So this is 1 minute and 44 seconds, very short. It's by Lise Olney from the Wellesley Board of Selectmen. She put this together in October.
Sorry, I forgot I was muted. Hang on. Here we go.
Board of Selectmen, as well as a town meeting member for Precinct E. This presentation is intended to help you understand the resolution proposed by the Board of Selectmen under Article 12, formerly Article 26. In this presentation, I'll explain the context and purpose of the resolution, and Sustainable Energy Director Mary Beth Martello will talk about where we are with the town's greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal and the Sustainable Energy Committee's work on the Town Climate Action Plan. There is broad worldwide consensus that we are facing an unprecedented environmental crisis. Record levels of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are wreaking havoc on global temperatures around the planet. According to NASA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, 2019 saw the second highest global surface temperatures since 1880, coming close to the record-breaking heat of 2016. The world's scientists and the United Nations have determined that we must limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius to avoid catastrophic effects that would make much of the planet uninhabitable. In order to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees, we need to dramatically reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that are the primary cause. The UN report and many subsequent reports have underscored that countries have collectively failed to stop the growth in emissions. There has been little recent action on the federal level in the US. It is really up to state and local governments to act.
If you could just go back to, okay. When I pause here, those 2 minutes, that's my only effort to convey that carbon causes problems. If anybody wants to broach anything along those lines, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll move along.
Hearing nothing, why don't you go along then?
Okay, thanks. I will say that if anybody does want to explore any questions brought up by Lisa's 1.5 minute presentation there, at the Energy Committee and/or Medfield Environmental Action, I'm sure would be glad to put together any kind of programming that is desired. But the point, I did want to include that because it's by someone local, but it's recent and it's very short. So we're going forward from there. So climate must be first and foremost in so many aspects of what we do. And this is a hard concept to grasp, and we're going to be wrestling with it for quite a while. But there is a worldwide emergency, whether we like it or not. I'm sorry, hang on a second here. We need to act like it with immediate and real action. So Greta Thunberg, if you've heard that name, that's the young activist from Sweden. She just last week turned 18. And I saw a notice that she's appearing with the Dalai Lama next week. Okay, anyway, she just turned 18 and she has said, if your house is on fire today, you wouldn't make a plan to start working on it in a few years. Sounds very reasonable. So there is a climate emergency. It's no longer a climate concern. It's no longer climate change. It's no longer a climate problem. It is an emergency. And Wellesley did, and Medfield might declare a climate emergency. I'm glad to come back to you to propose such, but I'm not doing that now. But what that would mean is not just a pointless resolution, because governments that take the emergency seriously are going in to an all of government response. Now, maybe that's a term that's very familiar to you. I've learned it recently. We're about to see that all of government response at the federal level very soon. All of government, meaning all aspects of the federal government are doing whichever aspect it is doing what they can and should do. And by the way, on the federal level, we're going to see our own Massachusetts John Kerry and Gina McCarthy high up in the administration of such all of government response. And Massachusetts is on the cusp of going to such, as a state, going to such since yesterday. We're awaiting the governor's signature. I haven't heard anything in the last 2 hours on this major and groundbreaking climate bill. And Wellesley is an example on the local level. They just passed such a resolution. The vote was overwhelmingly in favor. And climate concern is not just in these other places, it's everywhere, including Medfield. And Medfield, as in the last 8 months, we have a new organization, the Medfield Environmental Action, which even during this pandemic has been very active, and folks have shown up in large numbers and appreciated their programming. And they put together a survey, and in your packet is some of the responses from the survey. It was taken by over 500 Medfielders. 93% of them agreed the climate crisis poses a serious threat. 90% agreed that they support and encourage their local government in making policies that address the climate crisis. So as I said, there's more detail in your packet, and I'm sure MEA would be glad to come to speak with you about their ongoing efforts. So that brings me to the third point of my general comments: inconvenient. So I think I'm getting to know the three of you well enough, Mr. Chairman included, that you're all probably wondering at this point, so what are we supposed to do? We've got slashed budgets, and these problems are huge, I understand. Slashed budgets, multiple priorities, and a pandemic. I understand, and there's no magic solution to any of that, and I give my utmost respect as you face all of this. But it's at this point that I can mention that this, can you see here? Yeah, there you go. The book by Al Gore called An Inconvenient Truth, and he wrote that in 2006. So everything I'm saying perhaps has always been, and might for the foreseeable future be categorized as, heck, that's just darn inconvenient, Fred. And I get it if that's the response. I agree. It is. I don't know anybody who doesn't think the climate crisis, the climate emergency isn't inconvenient. It was a great title for the book, and it made it into a slide presentation and the film. And to connect the circle here, there was a group, and I think, Pete, you remember this, that got together in Medfield some years ago to watch that film, An Inconvenient Truth. And the folks who watched that film came out of it and said, what are we going to do? And as a result of that, this Medfield Energy Committee was put together in 2008. But why do I bring it up now? It's to remind us that the climate crisis then was definitely inconvenient, and the climate emergency we face today is certainly inconvenient. And unfortunately, it's even more inconvenient than it was 14 years ago. As I said, responding to climate is nothing like convenient. But over time, ingenuity and technology improvement and lots of good people have been devising responses. They don't currently add up globally to be sufficient, but they have been significant, and they lay the basis for everything that's going to go forward from here. And I'll point out this book. Pope Francis wrote this book as encyclical in 2015, and he challenged the entire moral world to confront and react and respond. And this a quotation, one sentence from the preface, most powerfully, he is asking us, the Pope in this book, is asking us to reject the illogic that insists that only markets can decide our future, and to recognize that the system has levers. And I love that quote, the system has levers. Individuals, institutions, and governments are all making choices, and we have the capacity to make different ones. And roughly speaking, governments indeed have adjusted levers over these years. There's such a wide array of incentives, regulations that help move the market adoption of the changes needed. We have hundreds of Medfielders who already have solar, who already have heat pumps, who already drive electric cars. We're not really aware of it. We tend to imagine that such things are somehow in the future. They're not, they're in the present. We just need to amplify that a lot. But in any case, this array of levers is likely to widen considerably in the near future. And this gets to why you have been hearing from me and the Energy Committee more in the last year or two, and will continue to do so. It's because we see the emergency, and we also see these various market levers having the potential to work with Medfield's budgetary issues, not against them. We have brought hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of profitable opportunity, not net cost, to the town, and we will continue to do so. And I could go through the list of what those are, but I think you remember those. As I said, though, I think we would all agree that even if profitable, it's still inconvenient. But I will also say that beyond motivations of concern about climate, which does bring a number of people to the Energy Committee, and I appreciate that, I do want to remind everyone that we, the Energy Committee, everyone I have had the pleasure to work with over these 12 years, all feel a strong sense of care, of respect, of responsibility. We take our civic duty seriously. We care about our town, its institutions, its history. We care about our friends, we care about our neighbors, we care about finances, we care about fiscal responsibility. From my 30 years experience in this town, I would dare say those same things should be said about every person who's ever stepped forward in town, and certainly from everyone who spends hundreds of hours, the many, many people who spend hundreds of hours on towns, boards, and committees, which brings me to wonder, why do I think I need to say this? Every town committee has this sense of responsibility, at least as far as I can tell. So this should be no big deal, and it goes without saying that we have this civic duty. So why do I say it? Well, I hope it's as simple as this, that as we do our job, as we do this job, it means we're paying close attention to a rapidly changing arena of energy, clean energy, renewables, and we become experts in this arena. And I admit we lose some sight of the forest for the trees. So that's the right way to put it. But I would also submit that others, if you're not in the committee, if you're not focusing on enough stuff, you're doing this particular research, it might seem that this perspective is out there in some way. But that is our responsibility. It's our responsibility to take the very, very best thinking out there, bring it to the town, bring it to your attention, put it to use profitably. That's what our job is. Which brings me to the very last segment of my general topics, which is boring. Boring. One final way to think about this reframing. I pose that everything that we may be wrestling with this past year or two, the next year or two, in the few years after that will very soon become old, will become quaint, will become archaic. People will look back at us and say, what were they spending so much time on? Why was it such a big deal? Wasn't it obvious? And that's what I see in the near future. And I think of the kids learning history in a few years. They'll look back anyway. That's the ultimate reframing, and we will get there. We will have to, we as American society at large, will have to be implementing changes that are massive to the point that we will be doing them over and over and over. Electric cars, electric vehicles, heat pumps. We won't have to wrestle with each individual decision. These will be happening so rapidly soon that it will be boring to most of us. To us energy geeks, perhaps we'll stay interested. But hopefully it'll go back to just utilities, just with the same elemental aspects that I talked about at the beginning. It'll be behind the scenes. But we're going through a major transition. This energy emergency that I'm referring to, the climate emergency, is not going away in our lifetimes, any of us, unfortunately, and I apologize. Okay, that's the end of my general comments. I'll bring up the specifics. They aren't many. We can come back and report on particular specifics. I will ask if you have comments about my general statement. I'd love to hear it. But what I'll mention is our work group structure and new construction. For new construction, we'll want Jim if he's here. Just I want to mention that we are a large committee, and somebody mentioned that again a month ago. I appreciate that. And we have, you may not realize it, Pete, you would, but Mike and Gus, you wouldn't know. We did in the last year go to a work group structure so that we do have separate MEC, subcommittee level groups working on each of these things in detail. So there's one on solar. There's one on Medfield State Hospital. There's one on the Dale Street process. There's one on warrant articles. There's one on the carbon plan, or carbon planning, I should say, and municipal energy. So we have broken up our work, and it's been very effective. People have worked, shall I say, efficiently. and I do want to say I'm very, very proud, very, very proud to be working with all of the Medfield Energy Committee members who've stepped up in major ways in the last year or two to put forward the work that the town needs. So is Jim here, may I ask? And can he be promoted? He skipped?
Oh, yeah, he just had the Mass IPL name, so.
Ah, good, good, good. Glad you're here, Jim. All right, and so I'll just make the general comments about new construction. I really appreciate the arc that we've gone through so far, and we're continuing to go through about the Dale Street new construction net zero question. I really appreciate the effort that everyone put into that. And I appreciate that it's continuing. We haven't gotten to the end of that. That's fine. We're in a good place. I hope everybody feels that way. But for better or for worse, all that consideration going into Dale Street really should be going into any new construction project today, any. Now, Medfield State Hospital is so massive, it requires, and it's so unique, it requires a whole set of considerations. But I'll first mention that yesterday, State Senator Mike Barrett, who is the Senate leader of the conference committee that finally produced the massive and groundbreaking climate bill, it just reported out on Sunday. He mentions it in these couple of sentences, he uses the word tools, and you can think when you hear tools, you can think of what I said, the Pope's term levers. So Mike Barrett says, some tools go to the state going forth from this climate bill. Some tools go to the state, some will go to the private sector, and some will go to the cities and towns. The projects and buildings that municipalities approve for construction this year will still be up and going strong in 2050, when the entire economy of Massachusetts in all its aspects must put out net zero emissions. So I hope folks are still listening. Thanks for your patience, because I'm now going to address a particular concern that everyone expresses, no matter what the context. And it goes like this: yes, but how much is it going to cost? That sounds great, Fred, but how much is it going to cost? And I don't mean to laugh off that concern. It's serious. It's the center of what we're doing. But I hope I'm getting across that everyone asks it, everybody wants to know. So in the case of new construction, we posed this question to the very top person in the state at the state energy office just a couple of weeks ago. So he looked at us and he blinked a few times and he said, why are you asking me this question now? He knew who we were and he knew we were paying attention. And we said, well, we're gathering resources. We're gathering experts' opinions to bring back to our town. And I'm going to report on that in just a second. And he said, oh, fine. Here's the answer. He says, all this stuff, net zero new construction, generally speaking, not always, but almost always, it costs nothing extra today if you plan to incorporate it at the beginning. If you don't, it will cost a whole hell of a lot when you have to do it later. Which ties back to what I just said, Mike Barrett saying the whole economy of Massachusetts in 30 years has to be net zero. So we'll be back. We'll be back to talk about net zero stretch code, especially if this bill is signed by the governor. But for now, we must work very hard to implement these kinds of concepts as well as possible in all our major new construction. We have gone through it, as I said, with Dale Street, and over 12 years, the Energy Committee has wanted to give input to the Medfield State Hospital process. In general, that hasn't happened until now. Many aspects of energy improvements were mentioned many times over the years, but the latest thinking wasn't necessarily incorporated at any stage. So that's why a year ago, and this is in your packet, we produced a resolution to ask you to request that clean energy standards be incorporated into the Medfield State Hospital RFP. And that was a year ago. And now also in your packet is the 5 pages of such recommended language that just were produced by our consultants, New Ecology, working under Eversource. That was just 2 or 3 weeks ago. There's a lot that that's behind those 5 pages. In the last 18 months or so, I have attended perhaps up to 100 hours of leading conferences covering this fast-changing arena of net zero and new construction. And I would say that over those 2 years, so much has changed and is still changing. We've worked somewhat closely with Newton, who's worked with 2 very large developers in their very large developments to agree to most of the very high efficiency standards along the lines of what we would recommend. And we've brought multiple outside experts into Medfield. We're also assembling resources particularly geared towards these questions of net zero in new construction and in gut rehab and in historic gut rehab, which is what we're facing at the historic buildings at Medfield State Hospital. And all of our inquiries advise that the kinds of criteria we are pursuing, that we're recommending, that we're advocating, are now expected by developers. They expect to see these things in RFPs. We are assembling a group of resources. It'll include the 1 minute and 44 seconds you've already seen, a link to that video, but an array of others all across the gamut to help you, the selectmen, and also the MSH DC committee members to come further up to speed in this, as I said, fast-paced, fast-changing arena of net zero in new construction and gut rehab. So with that said, it might be time for Jim to chime in if he'd like to say anything. He's working on the particular response for the development committee from the Energy Committee to the Development Committee by their 13th of January deadline.
Yeah, I'll just give a quick overview of what we're doing. But, for the first step is, of course, provide that input to the Development Committee and then give them time to work that and how they can incorporate that into the RFP. But basically, we had a great process working with Bev Gallo at Peregrine, had a good discussion with her. Her first draft has some good references to sustainability and energy efficiency. What we're looking at is making that a little bit more prominent, more specific, and more explicit. A lot of the discussion is fairly general in terms. When it references documents like either the zoning for the Medfield Hospital property or the master plan, the language in those documents reflected what was current in 2019 back to 2015 or 2016 for the master plan. And as Fred said, things have moved along a lot. So we're going to recommend some language and recommend some concepts to include that will be consistent with those statements in those documents, but bring it up to what the current practices in sustainable building and renewable energy and all that is. So we're putting that together. We'll submit that to the Development Committee by the 12th, and then follow along and work with them in the rest of January to explain what our thinking, hopefully encourage them to incorporate as much as possible into the RFP. And then when they present the RFP to you, we'll be here as well to walk you through any questions you may have on some of those specific criteria. But clearly, you know, given the climate emergency and the case for the climate emergency that Fred laid out, the hospital property is certainly the biggest development in the 25 years I've lived in Medfield, and I can't imagine another development of that size and scope coming along, maybe ever in the town's future. So it's really critical to make sure that we build something that is cognizant of and responsive to the climate emergency. Fred talked a lot about the climate bill that the legislature passed. He didn't talk as much about the fact that the Baker administration has already issued a roadmap to be net zero in 2050, with a goal of reducing carbon emissions 45% by 2030. And in it, it makes some very explicit statements about the fact that anything that any investment, building, new equipment, infrastructure that's going into place now that will not be turned over by 2050, will not be replaced, will not necessarily be upgraded, needs to address that and think about that net zero 2050 goal. The bill gives all of that, you know, a little bit more kind of force of law. But whether the governor signs that bill or not, and there's some question, there's some components in it that are stricter than his roadmap that I'm hearing he may not sign the bill. But even if he doesn't sign the bill, he is moving ahead with that 2050 roadmap. And you know, this is certainly a development that should align with the goals of the state and with the principles in there that the state is laying out of how to get there. With that, I will pause
Thanks,
if there's
Jim.
questions and turn it back to Fred.
No, thanks, Jim. That was great. And thanks for reminding me of to bring in the governor's plan. Now, I talked for a long time. I'm not used to doing that. And thank you for your patience very much, Mr. Chairman. I am here and Jim is here. If there are any comments or questions, and there are other members of the Energy Committee in the audience, if that perhaps might need to be addressed if there's any questions that pertain to them.
Any questions? Gus, do you want to start? Comments?
Well, I get no questions, Fred or Jim, and obviously, Jim, I heard your presentation to the Development Committee, so part of the reason I don't have questions is maybe I've heard about a lot. The one comment I'll make, Fred, and predictably, I am one of those people who absolutely is asking the financial questions. And so I'm delighted to hear that that's something that's on your radar screen. I think, the Energy Committee has done a lot of good. And I would concur with you that some of the developments in the energy area, particularly some of the developments in energy technology, are going to introduce the potential for further good and even more significant good along the way. The key concern I have is that as we pursue those opportunities, we do it in a way that is fiscally responsible. Those pressures that you acknowledged are real pressures. Those are pressures that are driving people out of this town. And right now, our outlook from a financial standpoint for the next couple of years is not that we're going to see windfalls. The fact that you've been able, in the case of the Dale Street School, to come in with at least a likely option of being able to achieve net zero at no cost to the town, and I do acknowledge some of that may require some deliberate outside financing to make some of those things make sense. I'm not holding your feet to the fire on the actual just project cost. I'm talking about a credible way of looking at what this costs the town. I think that's what turned me around on being more in favor of that than the tentative willingness to consider it that I had before we had the Lexington Selectmen come in and present some things. So I would encourage you not to lose sight of the financial side of things, even as I would encourage you to continue to push to find those kinds of opportunities and bring them to the town.
Mike, did you have any questions, comments?
No, just thank you for the presentation. Thanks for all the work that you're doing. I look forward to reviewing the comments along with everything else that's submitted with respect to the Medfield State Hospital RFP.
So I guess I would just make a couple comments, Fred and Jim. When I got 12 years ago, when I got concerned about what Medfield was doing about climate change, and reached out to Cindy Green and to Marie Zach Nolan and asked what they thought we should be doing. And Cindy was just very direct. She explained that we should figure out how to use less energy. And as a result of that decision and the Energy Committee being constituted and then studying how to use less energy on the municipal level, I think the town's energy budget has been cut dramatically, like 40% or something. I think it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that the Energy Committee is saving the town per year over what we were spending for energy 12 years ago. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that I would mention is, I mean, a lot of this is new to me. I hadn't heard of Passive House until this past year, and then started reading about it on the internet. And I was absolutely fascinated by the comment of one of the presenters from, I think it was one of the people from Newton that you brought over, Fred, to the Energy Committee meeting, who commented that the people that built the Passive House apartment building down in New York City, that one of the big things for them was that the tenants were so happy with the comfort level in their apartments because they were insulated to the nth degree, that there was very little temperature variation inside the apartment. The noise levels were lower, and they actually had lower turnover of tenants in the whole building than they had planned for, so that they were making more money as a result of building to a higher and better standard that was going to save energy and actually be better for the climate change issues in the world. So it was a very interesting realization for me that Passive House is actually better on many levels. And I've also learned in the past year that the costs of the higher energy standards have just been dropping dramatically, so that it's very close now to the cost of building to the higher energy standards is very close to the actual regular construction costs, but you're going to save a lot of money on the out years by the less dollars that people are going to spend on energy. So thank you for educating me over the past years, Fred. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the work the Energy Committee is doing. So thank you and Jim both. Anything else that you guys want to tell us about?
I'll just follow up with one. I mentioned it in passing, but just to remind that you will each be getting we're calling it the handout, and there's no paper these days, but it'll be a PDF with a batch of URL links, and it'll be a variety, as I said, a video like you just saw from the Wellesley Select Woman, but it'll also be very interesting talks by folks addressing these questions of incremental cost and how that incremental cost has gone down to zip and under what circumstances they have. And fascinatingly, it's when expectations are raised and competition comes in, that's when those incremental and experience comes in. That's the biggest thing. You get a builder who has experience, then their incremental cost for these added levels of insulation and other aspects of building tightness, et cetera, that goes to zero. And that they're competing on cost with buildings that are not, at the same level, at parity with buildings that don't have those advantages. Anyway, you'll get a whole packet that we're calling the handout. It's going to each of you and to the development committee. And a lot of work went into that, including a batch of what we're calling the PSA videos by experts. So it was PSA style. So from 2 to 6 minute videos, we're getting experts to give you snippets of what's been going on in this, as Jim and I are saying, rapidly developing field.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your presentation tonight. Good job, Fred and Jim.
Thank you very much for your attention. Really appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you coming. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you both.
And Jim.
Our next item is, well, do we have the Eversource person maybe?
Let's see, they were supposed to be joining while we were doing that. Let's see. No, I don't see Christine. Christine or Jackie, are you here? Nope, let's continue moving forward. I
Okay.
think they're having a problem connecting.
Okay, so our next item on our agenda is under discussion, potential votes, COVID-19 status update and CARES funding update, so that the federal government has made some changes. Christine?
So they've extended the deadline for spending the CARES funding that we had to December 31st of 2021. So that takes a little pressure off us in terms of having to turn back any of that money. So we'll continue to work with the school department on expending those funds. And then the Board of Health is meeting on Thursday, and they'll be giving us an update on vaccination for our first responders. That's all I have on that.
Do you have in your mind just sort of a gross figure as to how much we have unspent of our CARES money in terms of hundreds of thousands? Maybe is it 300,000 or?
I would say at this point we're probably around 200,000.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
Yes,
we're still waiting for some of our reimbursements from FEMA to make that final determination.
Right.
I think we're in that ballpark.
Okay.
That's correct.
And that's out of an initial 900 to $1 million that they gave us?
1.1.
1.1.
Oh, 1. Oh, great. Okay. Our next action items, agenda item is Aurora at Medfield Regulatory Agreement, Local Initiative Program.
So
So
this
this-
is the standard agreement that we received from DHCD regarding any of our local initiative program projects. And this is for the Aura, which is the Legion property.
And the town basically entered into this local initiative program with the developer. So it was an agreed upon 40B development. And so one of those processes is this regulatory agreement. Any questions about the agreement? Gus, maybe?
Yeah, I did. I only had one, and it's nothing that is an issue of whether we should approve it. Is the oversight of this project a little different than some of our other projects? It seemed like this was the like DHCD. It seemed like the state was more directly involved in this one than the others when I read it. So either I've forgotten how the other packages all read, and I'm just curious. It's not that it's a
No, actually, are you referring to that they're going to pay a fee every month for DHCD to review it? I don't remember seeing that in one of our other ones. So I think that would be a new fee that they've instituted for that.
Right. And Pete, you might recognize this. One of the reasons I homed in on that was those regional selectmen's meetings that you and I attended over the past few years. They haven't had them in about a year, but the one conversation that came up a few years ago with some of the other towns where they had 40B projects and nobody was really monitoring them very well. So you'd have people that were basically going to banks and getting market rate financing on a affordable unit, and then they were leaving town with the proceeds from the mortgage. And so a couple of the towns were wrestling with kind of the enforcement end of affordable housing. And it seemed to me that this had a little more provisions in it than I recalled seeing in some of the early ones. So perhaps that's the case.
Some people were installing, I think, their children in the affordable units and age restricted complexes.
Right. That was just curiosity on my part, though.
Okay. Anything, Mike, from you?
Nope.
Do we have a motion then?
Sure. I would move that we approve. And are we signing or is just Pete signing?
On this one, I think
There's just Pete.
it can just be Pete.
All right. So I would move that we approve and authorize Osler Peterson, as chairman of the board, to sign on behalf of the town the regulatory agreement between DHCD and the developer of the Aura development.
Second.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
and Mr. Marcucci, yes.
Okay,
thank you.
I've just been told that Christine Cosby from Eversource is here.
Okay.
Yes,
I will
I
go
don't-
back and recuse myself again.
Hi, Chris.
I don't know if you can hear me.
We
We can hear
can. Thank you for
Okay.
coming.
Oh, yeah, I joined the meeting at 7 and it said that I was muted. And I kept trying to unmute myself, but I think I had to be unmuted on your end.
We
So there
keep
was a
pretty
little-
tight control of our meetings here, Chris. Sorry about that.
We've
Oh,
heard there's
no,
something, we've heard there's something called Zoom bombing, so tight controls.
If it makes you feel any
No.
better, I was having trouble with my microphone, so I said, all right, I'll call in. And then when I called in, it told me I was going to be on mute, which meant I couldn't actually tell you that I had called in. So I pulled the headset out.
The same thing with me. It was like, for some reason, the laptop I have, the company laptop I have a very hard time getting into the Zoom. So for the most part, a lot of times I have to call in for the meetings. So, so that anyway, here I am.
If you can walk them through the application, that would be great.
You're looking to put in a
Okay.
new pole for a single charging station, it sounds like.
Yes, on Pleasant Street, right there at the bank, where the bank is located, we're looking to install a new pole, 18/1A, on Pleasant Street. And the purpose of that pole would be to provide an underground service for a new vehicle charging station that would be located at that property. 478 Main Street.
And I'm sorry, anything else?
That's it.
Gus, any questions?
I did, and again, this is all more in the form of curiosity to understand this better, and partly why my curiosity was piqued is we had a discussion, I think a little less than a year ago, about charging stations on town properties. My curiosity is broader. First, the charging station is a charging station being put in by the Bank of America.
Yes.
Okay, and that's kind of an amenity for the public or the bank president or what?
I would think that it's probably for, the customers.
Okay,
I could double check on that, but I would imagine it would be to anybody who comes in the parking lot.
that's fine. I more as much as anything, if the Bank of America took the initiative to put in a charging station, I was asking to give them some kudos in an official town meeting for being willing to do that for the public's benefit. So let's assume they're doing that. The next question I had was why a charging station requires a pole as opposed to simply somehow or another powering it out of the building.
Well, it's actually going to also require a pad mount transformer. And the way of getting the primary feed is out in the street, and the way of getting that primary feed into the private property is you have to tap off the overhead, go underground at the pole location, at the pole, and then go underground to the pad mount transformer. That's all primary. And then once it gets to the transformer, it transforms to secondary, which would which would be the service to the charging station.
Okay. And so I take from that the voltage to charge a car is different than the voltage to run a house. That
I don't know. I mean, it's usually
Okay.
secondary that feed a house, So
Yeah. Okay.
But the primary voltage, it requires a primary voltage to
Okay.
supply
Okay.
what the charging station will need.
Okay. Next question is who actually bought the charging station? Is it the bank?
I don't know. I don't know
So-
about the specifics of that. I could find out for you if you.
No. I was opening up the possibility if NSTAR or Eversource said, "Oh no, we give anybody that wants to put charging stations in, we give them to them." So, but only because at some point here, I'm sure we'll be talking about charging stations here in town. So I'm just getting the lay of the land. And then the last question I had was, so if it's on bank property, it's bank initiated, and you're putting this in, is this separately metered or does it? I'm just curious how the bank pays for it.
Yeah, it's separate. It would be separately metered.
Separately metered. Okay.
Yep.
Those are my questions. Oh no, I had one more. how long does it take to, I was thinking a bank parking lot, if it's for the public, people go in and they cash checks or make a deposit and they go back out in the car. And I was wondering, how long do you have to be on a charging station to recharge your car?
I don't know. I mean, I
Okay.
can certainly, I'm
No,
not
no, no.
really involved in the charging station project. I
You're
just
just
get
the
involved with, yeah, I know. I
Yeah.
just get involved with getting any kind of permission that's needed from the town or from a private property.
Okay.
I had to get permission from the bank for the Padmont transformer.
Yeah.
That's my involvement, is the
Okay.
rights of it,
Okay.
you know.
Well, you don't have to do any work to answer the questions you didn't have answers for. I appreciate the answers you gave me. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And Gus asked the one question that I had, which was why the poll was necessary in the first instance. I do think that the charging stations are usually 220 current instead of 110 to get them to charge faster, but we would need the Energy Committee members back who all own Priuses to find out how long it actually takes to charge. So I have no more questions. So that do we have a motion, Gus? Do you want to?
I would
Mr.
move.
Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This was a
So
hearing.
this is actually a public hearing, so you
Yeah.
should just confirm that there's nobody in the public that's interested in making a comment.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Sorrell.
then vote to close the hearing.
Right.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, sir. If there is anybody that wants to ask questions or to make comments, could they please raise their hand through the Zoom? And Christine will promote you to let you make a question or a comment. Hearing none, I will move. Oh, I guess, Gus, you want to move to close the hearing?
Yeah. So I move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Murray, yes. Hearing is hereby closed.
And then we need a motion to,
So I move that we grant the petition submitted on behalf of NStar Electric Company doing business as Eversource Energy and Verizon for the purpose of obtaining a grant of a location to install one new pole for the purposes described in the package that came with the petition.
and I'll second that. And I think the reason that Verizon is involved is that I think that the deal in Medfield is that the utilities,
Common usage.
they decide who owns all the poles in the town. And I guess, is it that Verizon owns all the poles in Medfield?
Well, no, all the poles are jointly owned. But in Medfield, it happens to be maintained by Eversource. So Eversource would be the one that would install this pole, not Verizon.
But all the poles are jointly owned by Eversource and Verizon, huh? Okay.
Right. Well, the pole's going to be out in the public way, and it's going to be in line with the other distribution line poles that are out there. So Verizon, just because, Verizon will attach because it's all part of the existing pole line. So when we put a new pole within that pole line, they will attach.
Okay, you've course corrected me. My understanding was that all the poles in the town were owned by one utility and that the utilities sort of swapped out towns as to which town owned all the poles in each town, but
no, what it is, the majority of the poles are jointly owned between Eversource and Verizon, and then certain towns are maintained, like Eversource maintains Medfield, so that Eversource would get any kind of rights that are needed, and they would also do the installation. But like the town of Hopkinton, Verizon maintains Hopkinton. So they all maintain different towns. So if this was in Hopkinton, Verizon would be submitting the petition, including Eversource in on it, and then Verizon would be setting the pole in that particular town. But Eversource does maintain the town of Medfield.
totally random curiosity. How much does a new telephone pole cost these days?
That I don't know.
Okay. Do we have a motion? We have a motion seconded.
Pete, for the record, I think your question was far more right in the strike zone than any of mine were. So I believe, so I had the motion. Pete, did you second? You ran
I did.
off. Okay, then Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
And Mr. Murphy, yes.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back to our action items now, and we accept the resignation of Brian Sarit.
Yes, this is put forth by the police chief. He was currently a special police officer and has submitted his resignation.
Okay. Do we need to vote that, Chris, or?
Yes, please.
So I
Okay.
would move that we accept the resignation of Brian Surratt as a special police officer.
Second.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Murby,
Yes.
and Mr. Marcucci, yes.
We have nothing on our consent agenda. We have no citizen comment lined up, I don't think, do we, Chris?
Nope, but we did have another addition to the agenda, so it might not be on the one that you printed.
Oh, all right.
Which is just to vote to authorize the chair to sign the appointing authority notification to civil service regarding the appointments of the following individuals to the Medfield Police Department: Garrett Ledbetter, William Bento, Michael Downing, Francis This, and Terrence Tian.
Do we have a motion to that effect then?
So these are we've already appointed all of these folks.
We've appointed them. We're just filing the paperwork with civil service so that civil service has their official hiring date and in what order of seniority for the contract purposes.
Gotcha. So I would move that we authorize the chairman to sign the appointing authority notification to the civil service regarding the appointments of Garrett Ledbetter, William Bento, Michael Downing, Francis This, and Terrence Tian to the Medfield Police Department.
Second.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Murby,
Aye.
and Mr. Marcucci, aye.
Anything else on the revised agenda, Chris?
No, that was it. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm down to then town administrator updates, which I see nothing there for.
I have nothing this evening. Coming off vacation week, I have nothing to give you this evening.
Okay. Anything, Nick, that you wanted to share? Or? Okay, selectmen reports. Mr. Murby.
Had a nice holiday. It's pretty quiet. The natives were not restless over the course of the time, at least up at our end of the town. So basically, it was a pretty nice couple of weeks. I hope everyone else had a nice couple of weeks. The only minor just update I can give you, we had the discussion around the dog walking up at the state hospital. I know John Thompson is looking into signs, so the process of getting some signs pulled together is ongoing. Jen Cronin apparently has been spending more time up there and has been letting people know that we basically changed the rules that if you have dogs inside the quad, they should be on a leash. So it's kind of a soft introduction of that tighter rule up there. But we're to their credit and thanks to them, we are actually already making progress, even though the signs aren't there yet. That's all I had.
Thank you so much. Mike, anything from you?
I just wanted to pass along a note of thanks to all of the town workers who did work over the holiday and had to work on the holidays themselves, particularly the police, the fire, and the DPW. I want to commend the DPW on the excellent job they did managing the post-Christmas and post-New Year's rush at the transfer station. There was quite a line of traffic when I was going both of those days, but they seemed to keep everybody moving and everyone was in good spirits. And I know they've had to make some adjustments to their routines and their calendars and their schedules with the uptick in the COVID cases. So I wanted to pass along my thanks to them. And then I had a little bit of kind of a downer point in my selectmen reports here. I know we have right now only one more meeting on the calendar for January. I think given with town meeting coming up and all of the issues we're going to have to deal with and what appears to be a relatively short meeting this evening, I'm thinking we are probably going to need another January meeting to cover some of this stuff. I know potentially on the 19th, we could be spending a lot of time with the fire chief related to recruiting new call firefighters. I think that's sort of the lead, the starring presentation that night. And so we may need another night for business. And I thought we ought to at least start thinking about when that date would be. And I think we probably are going to need to do one meeting in particular devoted to the Medfield State Hospital RFP. And obviously that'll depend in part on the development committee schedule and the rest of it. But I just, from a scheduling standpoint, it would be great, I guess, if the only meeting, we'll have one more meeting in January. I just don't know if that's going to be manageable given all the stuff we have to deal with. And so I just wanted to raise that. It probably makes sense to think of maybe the 26th, and it would be meeting 3 weeks in a row. But I just wanted to flag that because I want to make sure we have some of these longer presentations. It worked out well tonight, where Fred had a longer presentation, but that was sort of the featured. He was the featured act this evening, and so I don't want to have a situation where if we have one of our longer agendas, kind of something like that would get crammed in, and so it's good that he had the time he needed tonight, and I want to make sure that we do that for some of these upcoming. So I just want to raise that scheduling issue.
Yeah, Mike, on the state hospital RFP, the development committee right now is planning to at least present the draft RFP for review by the selectmen on the 19th, and with the idea that 2 weeks after that, presumably if it's not controversial, then they'd get the go ahead. So the 20th I just want to make sure it's coming in then. If it looks like there's things we need to talk about before you and Pete are comfortable with the RFP, then it would really make sense to have a meeting on the 26th. But at least the RFP is still on schedule to be showing up on your desks or in front of you on the 19th.
And just on that point, Gus, just procedurally, if Pete or I have comments on it, do you want us to reserve those until we have a discussion, or should we? I know it's problematic for us that we can't convey them to you, but you want us to convey those comments to Todd, and then you all discuss them. How do you want us to handle that?
Yeah. So first off, I think the best way to handle it is in the most expeditious way. So the committee itself is hoping, assuming the RFP is good and it's acceptable to everybody, the committee is hoping to be able to issue that RFP sometime in late February or early March at the latest, and that's all just trying to get the ball rolling on this. So my suggestion would be give your comments back to Todd. And that's probably the right, and Sarah. I would copy Sarah, and actually Todd, Sarah, and Nick would probably be the three that would be good to get them. And that way I see them once we have our actual meetings. What I don't have, I mean, I've been impressed with Bev Gallo, so I'm optimistic that this is going to be, if the committee can get through the RFP fast enough with minimal complications, then I'm optimistic it's going to be a good RFP. We had the initial discussion we had was just on the very upfront part, which I thought was going to be superficial, and that drove a pretty long conversation within the committee that got at a lot of the strategic questions. So I think the sooner the feedback comes into the committee, the better. If we don't have a clean go ahead at the beginning of February, then we just don't have a clean go ahead, and we'll have to stretch out the launch time a little bit, which I think there's some flexibility to do. So that'd be my suggestion. Don't sit on it. Give it to the committee.
Okay, thank you, Mike, for commending the town employees. I noticed that the line to get into the transfer station went back to just about the children's center. When I went, it was remarkable how busy they were. The two things that I had to report on were well, I guess three things. I just personally, I tend to go up to the state hospital a lot, and I did notice that there were still a lot of dogs off leash, despite our request that they be leashed. So that I think people just they don't know about it yet. But the second thing is the townwide master planning committee did put together their report, and I know that they are looking to come in and present it to the select board. So that should be happening fairly soon.
Hey, Pete, a quick question on that.
Yep.
Sarah had issued, I think she sent out an email with links to a report. It might even been back in Thanksgiving. And then I think in our last meeting or the meeting before that, you mentioned that the townwide master plan would be issuing the report. Do you know if there's a revised report that is beyond the one that Sarah sent out?
I think it's the same one. Yep.
There's a final draft of it, so I will send you the links for the final.
Okay. I just figure if I'm going to read something and spend time on it, I'd rather get the latest edition. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, It's very lengthy. It's in 3 sections, and the first section is the main meat of it, and that's a couple hundred pages. The main recommendation too for us is that there be an implementation committee created to follow up and monitor the town's progress with the master planning issues, and report on it on an annual basis to the select board and to the town meeting. The
Hmm.
other thing that I was involved with since we last met was the Medfield Foundation annual fund, and and we actually had a legacy fund meeting last night. And I can just report that the annual fund, the first ever Medfield Foundation annual fund, was a great success, and seemed to generate a lot of interest in the Medfield Foundation Legacy Fund, which is the endowment that the Medfield Foundation is creating for the town of Medfield. The initial goal is to have $1 million endowed fund that will be able to throw off grants, then around $40,000 a year for different projects in town. But there was a lot of donations to the Legacy Fund, we think, as a result of the annual fund mailing and the different and there was another mailing to the initial group of founders. The way that the Medfield Foundation is trying to get to the $1 million endowed fund is by challenging people and businesses in town to become founders and make a $5,000 contribution over 5 years or more. And we actually have our first civic founder who has signed up, the Holistic Wellness Center, Dara O'Connor and Sarah's last name is Henkin, something like that. I'm probably getting it wrong. I'm sorry here, Sarah. Are you correcting me, Gus? Do you know?
Were you talking about Sarah Lemke?
No.
Okay.
It's the person who runs the Holistic Wellness Center.
Oh, okay.
Sarah's, and it begins with an H, Henkin maybe. So we were very excited that they joined as founders, this new group, civic founders for businesses in town. Anything else that we should deal with before the meeting adjourns? We have a couple informational things, the Clark Tavern decision and the CARES Act extension notice from the state government. Anything else?
I have nothing else this evening.
We need a motion to go to dinner then.
I would move that we adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Murby,
Aye.
and Mr. Marcucci, aye. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
everyone.
Good night.
Take care.